Finding reliable, qualified healthcare staff shouldn't be a constant challenge. At Express Healthcare, they specialize in partnering with hospitals, behavioral health, and long-term care facilities to provide caregivers, CNAs, and nurses on a shift-by-shift or contract basis, helping you maintain coverage, continuity, and quality of care without compromising standards. Express Healthcare is a Joint Commission certified, locally owned healthcare staffing firm that puts quality and compliance first. Every clinician they place is a W-2 employee, fully credentialed, insured, and covered by a professional liability, reducing risk and administrative burden for your facility. Express's comprehensive credentialing process ensures clinicians arrive ready to work, aligned with your policies, and focused on delivering safe, compassionate care from day one. And because their staff have access to instant pay at the end of each shift, they can quickly attract and retain dependable professionals who show up, stay engaged, and prioritize your patients. When you work with Express Healthcare, you're not just filling shifts, you're gaining a responsive staffing partner who understands your community, challenges, and commitment to high-quality care. Express Healthcare, local partnership, trusted clinicians, quality care every shift. Learn more at jobs.expresshealthcarenw.com or call them at 503-612-1550. Welcome to Transform Your Workplace, the show all about helping leaders build better workplaces by getting practical, human, and a little more intentional about how work actually gets done. I'm your host, Brandon Laws, and each week we dig into what's changing at work, what's worth paying attention to, and what leaders can actually do differently starting today. Before we jump in, a quick thanks to our sponsor, Xenium HR. Xenium supports growing organizations with HR, payroll, and learning and development programs built for the real world. If you're thinking about leveling up your people strategy, make sure to check out Xenium's 2026 virtual workshop calendar. You can find that at xeniumhr.com/events. All right. Today's conversation is a great one. My guest is Jacob Morgan, and he's back on the show to talk about his new book, The 8 Laws of Employee Experience: How to Build a Future-Ready Organization. The book comes out in early February 2026. In this conversation, we unpack what Jacob learned from interviewing over 100 CHROs and why so many organizations have lost their way post-pandemic. We talk about why chasing perks and trends can quietly hurt performance, how leaders get stuck playing defense instead of building the future they actually want, and why employee experience is not an HR thing but an everyone thing. You'll also hear us get into what AI is and isn't doing well at work yet, how to separate trends from truths, and what it really means to know your people, and why learning has to move beyond check-the-box programs if it's going to matter. If you're a leader, an HR pro, or an executive trying to make sense of all the noise and building something that lasts, this conversation will challenge your thinking in the best way. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Jacob Morgan. Jacob, it is such a pleasure to have you back on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a while.
I'm excited, though. You've got a new book that's coming out in February. It's called The 8 Laws of Employee Experience: How to Build a Future-Ready Organization. Before we get into some of the laws, we're not going to be able to cover everything, but in terms of the framework around this book, The 8 Laws, what did you see across the 100 CHR interviews that maybe informed how organizations are just not future ready yet and you decided to write this book?
Well, so it's an interesting story because originally I was just going to do a update to the book that I wrote in 2017 called The 8 Laws of Employee Experience. Oh, I'm sorry, the Employee Experience Advantage. And so originally when I signed my contract with Wiley, it was really to just do an update to that book, because a lot of the frameworks in that book are still relevant and a lot of companies still use it. So I thought, okay, I'll update it. It's been 10 years. We have AI and stuff like that. And so I actually started that doing a second update to that book, a second edition. And as I was doing the research and the writing and interviewing CHROs, I started to realize, whoa, I have enough here where this isn't just an update to that book. This is an entirely new book. And I think really what I realized is that during and post pandemic, a lot of organizations have lost their way. And it's actually funny because we even wrote this on the Amazon book description. Like the header of the actual book description says, organizations around the world have lost their way. It's time to get back to basics and focus on what really drives people and performance. And what I realized is that in chasing talent, and again, this is just the first two sentences, in chasing talent, organizations have turned employee experience into an entitlement culture, lavishing perks without accountability, lowering standards in the name of empathy, and confusing short-term fixes with long-term solutions. And the result, performance suffers, leaders are scared to lead, and culture drifts. And this is pretty much what I realized after doing these 100 CHRO interviews, is that companies were, I don't know, I felt like they were drifting. They didn't have like a clear sense of direction. They didn't have a clear purpose. They weren't really sure how to talk about employee experience. And I thought we were making a lot of progress before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, everything went out the window. And so this book is really just about recentering and refocusing on the core 8 things that matter most. So a few kind of general themes that I realized from interviewing these CHROs. First is that most organizations are still very much in defense mode, not offense. They're not proactive. They're not using foresight. They're not trying to predict. They're not trying to anticipate. It's almost like somebody's punching them and they're just trying to keep blocking and, use defensive techniques. Second thing that became very apparent, which nobody wants to talk about, is that the entitlement culture is 100% real. I can't tell you how many CHROs told me very interesting stories about their employee base and how entitlement exists. And they gave me examples and stories. And then I would ask these CHROs, great, I'm going to use this in the book. Give me your formal job title, how you want to be referenced. And they would all say, oh, no. You can't actually, you can't put my name. You can't use anything that I just shared with you in the book. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is a great story. And they said, oh, we don't want to be viewed as anti-employee, so we can't have that in the book, right? PR teams, legal teams, nobody would sign off on this. But rest assured, it's real. And I don't care how many people want to deny it and how many people want to say, well, we're just treating our employees differently. I'm not going to curse on this podcast, but that's BS completely. The entitlement culture is real. Well-being programs have gotten out of whack. Engagement programs have gotten out of whack. It's just gotten too much. And whenever I ask CHROs, why are you doing this? They never say because it's about our people. They say because our competitors are doing it. And so we inadvertently created this big snowball effect where, oh, you're doing it, well, I'm doing it. You're doing it, I'm doing it. And now we have this crazy ballooned, these programs and perks where we're forgetting about the core nature of work, mutual value exchange. A couple other things, AI is here, but it's not transformative yet. In fact, at the time of recording this, I don't know if you saw, but what was the guy's name who wrote The Big Short? Michael Burry?
Michael Lewis, I think. It's about Michael Burry. He was the one that shorted the...
Yes. Yeah, Michael Burry. So I just pulled it up here. So obviously very famous investor. The whole notion of The Big Short, the movie, came from him. And he is shorting Palantir, NVIDIA, I think to the tune of $1 billion because he says we're in an AI bubble. These companies are overvalued and a lot of these things are going to collapse. And I find a lot of similar discussions with CHROs. It's here, but it's not transformative yet. Right? So we're kind of like dipping our toe in the water, but it's not making anything revolutionary. And the last kind of 2 or 3 things, change is taking a lot longer than leaders realize. They assume that, they hear and see AI and they think, great, we're going to plug it in and we'll be off to the races. Some companies have told me it's taken them 2, 3, 4 years to clean up their data before they can even use these AI tools. So it's not as easy as people think. And the last kind of 2 insights here, CHROs are the CEOs of people. This was a pretty interesting insight for me because CHROs they're really getting a seat at the table. They're future of work officers, they're employee experience officers, they're A officers. They're no longer just HR. And then lastly, employee experience is not an HR thing, which so many people assume it to be. It's an everyone thing and it's being permeated across the whole company. So those are some of the initial insights from writing the book.
I want you to hone in a little bit on the playing defense part and not being on the offensive side. Are we just responding to trends that our competitors are doing? Are we listening to survey feedback from our employees and then feel like we just need to take action rather than stepping back and figuring out where are we going as an organization and what kind of frameworks we need to put in place to have a great employee experience that fits our culture? I think that's the key, right? Is we're following what our competitors are doing and we're just responding to trends that are happening. What did you see in the interviews?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of CHROs and business leaders in general are spending all their time on the tactical execution of the day to day, filling roles, writing job descriptions, hiring, firing, maintaining policies, rules, regulations, this and that. Very few are thinking into the future and asking themselves, well, what kind of a company do we want to build and how are we going to build it? And so if every day you spend time just asking, how are we being impacted? What is this going to mean for us? And you never take a step back and ask yourself, well, what kind of a future do we want to build? What kind of a company do we want to have? Then, yeah, everything that you do day to day is going to be reactive. I mean, it's like playing any sport. I mean, imagine playing soccer where everybody you put on the field is defense and all they do is just try to, block shots. And that's kind of what's happening for a lot of organizations out there. They're just out there trying to block shots. What's happening with AI, what's happening with geopolitics, like try to block the shot, try to block the shot. Very few are really trying to ask themselves, what do we want? What kind of a company do we want? And I think that is I think it's a mistake and it's a missed opportunity for a lot of organizations because there's not like one potential future. There's many potential futures. Some companies might get disrupted a lot by AI. Other companies might not. Some companies might go into one area. Other companies might get acquired. Like there's a lot of potential scenarios and futures that can happen. And the way that a lot of business leaders act is that we're all barreling towards one identical future and all we can do is try to, again, block shots. But that's not the case. You can build the future in the company that you want. And we're just not doing that, or at least a lot of companies are not doing that.
Yeah, you cautioned in chapter 2 that trends are not truths, and it's I think for leaders, CHROs, for example, it's so easy to just chase the latest trend, whether like unlimited PTO, AI tools, 4-day work weeks, like all the things that employees are talking about needing in terms of a good employee experience. Like, how do we tell the difference between what might be like a fad or a trend that's not actually going to make a difference long term in our organizations?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because even now you hear a lot of stories about AI and again, so many companies using it. But now you're also hearing a lot of stories that companies are spending more time fixing work done by AI than being productive with AI. And this is a trend known as work slop, where basically what happens is a lot of employees, they get tasked to do something, whether it's content, whether it's a presentation, whether it's code, whatever it is, design. They go into these AI tools. They put in the prompts, they get the work back, and they send it off to their leaders, completed work, here it is. And there's not a lot of QA, there's not a lot of reviewing, there's not a lot of critical thinking, like the insight, all that stuff is missing. So it's kind of doing the work on the surface level, but not giving the unique insight that a human can bring. And so what ends up happening is that people who review that work are saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a little off. That might be wrong. Like, there's probably a better way we can do this. This doesn't really make as much sense. So you're getting the responses back, but it's not adding value in the way that you should. And so a lot of employees are now having to review all the work that was submitted and double check it and then make changes to it. So what is supposed to be a productivity and efficiency tool is now turning into something that we are having to double check and spend more time fixing. And this is a danger of outsourcing critical thinking and work to AI. Like, you just assume that it's going to do the work for you. And, I have I have had funny experiences with this. I have somebody on my team, for example, who helps me with some creative elements and editing, and they're based overseas. And sometimes I give them feedback on something, and their response that they send back to me, I can tell is from ChatGPT. Like, it's perfectly worded. It's English words, but you can read the response that they're sending you back after I give them feedback, and you can just tell, you did not write this. This is not the way a human speaks. And I've worked with you for over a year, and I know how you speak. This is not it. So I get the response back, but it's not a human response. It's not, you know what I mean? It's like the very surface level of response. And that's not what I'm looking for. And that's not what a lot of leaders and employees are looking for. So how do you separate the signal from the noise? I think there are, several things that you can do. So in the book, I have a framework called STEEPLE. And I won't go through all of it, but it's an acronym that stands for things like society, technology, ethics, things of that nature. And you can ask yourself on a regular basis, well, what are the various trends in each one of these broad categories that are potentially impacting our business? And then you kind of go through your team and you ask yourself, a series of very simple questions. Is this something that you should adapt to? Is this something that you should pause? Or is it something that you should push back against? So adapt means, yes, whatever the trend is or whatever the thing is, you should be embracing internally. Pause means, well, it's something that we should maybe be paying attention to, but we're going to not make any investments in it. We're just going to kind of hold off and see where things go. And push back is saying, well, we get it's a trend out there, but it's not really relevant for us. So for example, look at something like, those augmented and virtual reality glasses. Very few organizations are at the phase where they're actually adapting and implementing these things. But there are a lot of organizations, especially in logistics and manufacturing, who are kind of like, well, it seems like there could be some potential out there. We're not going to make any big investments, but we're going to pay attention to that and see where things go. And there might be some companies out there, maybe you're in consulting, you look at that and you're like, well, we see it's an interesting trend, not really relevant for us, so we're not going to be really doing much with that. So having these types of conversations with your team is really important because not every trend is a truth. And just because a trend or something might be impacting one company doesn't mean it's going to be impacting you or one team. It could be in one company. Maybe it's something relevant for one team, not really relevant for you. So don't assume that whatever's happening out there is just as relevant for you as it is for everybody else.
I want to get into some of the laws. We're not going to be able to cover everything, but I'm curious, if you can highlight what the 8 laws are, list those off, and then also how you came to those 8. Was it through the interviews? Were you already thinking about it and you had a hypothesis about what laws that you wanted and then the interviews confirmed it? Or how did you go about that?
So to answer kind of the first part of that question, yes. So as I was interviewing a lot of these organizations around the world, I was kind of just trying to see what are some of the common trends, the patterns out there. What are organizations doing? What are they thinking about? And after having all those conversations, that's kind of when I realized that, well, there's some very common things that organizations are missing or not thinking about or could be a potential, could be doing a better job of. And so really these 8 laws are a return to basics. So what I tried to do for the book is to give a little bit of a futurist framework for these things. And so I took these 8 laws and I tried to look at not just where we are today, but where we're going in the next 5 or 10 years with these 8 laws. And that's kind of, the framework that makes up the book. And the whole idea of this is that you follow these 8 laws, you'll be able to build a future-ready organization. And a future-ready organization is not just one that is, able to adapt and survive and thrive, but it's one where you're able to combine these ideas of technology, people, performance to really drive change and build the company that you want to build. So the 8 laws are, number 1, decoding the human signal, which is really about knowing your people, not just from a tech perspective, but from a human perspective. The second law is acting with empathetic excellence. And the whole idea that the whole argument that I make for this section of the book is that really when we think about people, we should be thinking of 3 things: competence, merit, and empathy. And I kind of lay out a whole framework on what that looks like. And I make the argument that the most important type of diversity inside of a company is cognitive diversity. It's how you think. And there are a lot of experiments and studies that have been done that show just because people look differently or just because they might have a different background doesn't mean that they think differently. And when it comes to solving problems, when it comes to innovation, you really want people who think differently, not kind of the superficial diversity of just because they look differently. So I make a lot of arguments for that in the book. The next law is grow or go. And here the whole idea is that growth is a new form of job security. So your ability to learn new things and to move around the company is now a form of job security. The next one is design for flexibility. And flexibility, not just in terms of where you work or when you work, but shaping your own career path within the company. And the next law is make people the first principle. So there are a lot of companies out there, for example, who say that they value their people and people are number one. Very few companies who actually do it. So this law talks about how do you actually do it. Law number 6 is lead like the experience starts with you. And this is for all the leaders out there. Employee experience starts with you. So you have to act like you were the one responsible for it. And again, the book lays out. And the last 2, use technology to amplify humanity. So how do you use technology in a way that unlocks the unique things that humans bring instead of trying to replace them? And the last law is run culture like an operating system. So just like you have a piece of software that has updates and bug fixes and things like that, culture needs to be thought of the same way. So from a high level, those are the 8 laws, and infused in each one of those laws are foresight frameworks and principles and AI and looking at what these things look like over the next 5 to 10 years. And there's stories and quotes from CHROs, and there's a lot in each one of these.
Yeah. So much good stuff. I want to ask you a few things about law number 1, decode the human signal. So you shared a story I'd never heard of before, the Henry Ford's sociological department. This is an early extreme attempt to like get to know your people. But in today's context, what does an ethical version of that door knocking look like?
Yeah, so this was actually a unique story. I've never heard of this story either. And this is one of the benefits of using AI, because I used AI tools to help me find and uncover these really unique stories that, quite honestly, I don't know how I would have found this had I not come across this. But for people not familiar with it, in the early 1900s, Henry Ford created this department called the sociological department. And basically, at the time, he doubled the average salary worker's wage. I think it was around $2 per day or something like that, to $5, so more than double. But he wanted to make sure that his investments were paying off. So if I'm going to give you double the salary of everybody else on average, I want to make sure that you're not gambling, that you're not drinking, that you're not living in squalor, that you're taking care of yourself and your family, because I'm protecting my investment. So what he did is he created this sociological department. And what these people would do is they would go and they would pay visits to Ford employees. So if you worked in Ford manufacturing, you might be sitting down for dinner and all of a sudden you'd get a knock on your door and you would open the door and there would be 2 people who would say, "Hi, we're from the Ford sociological department. Can we come in and just ask you and your family a couple of questions?" And they would try to just get a sense of how you're living, right? Are you a good person? Is the money being put to good use? And he would really try to know his employees. And I draw the analogy today where, of course, it sounds very creepy. If you were sitting at home and all of a sudden you got a knock on the door and your boss showed up and said, "Hey, we just want to make sure that the salary that we're giving you we're getting returned. Let me talk to your wife or your husband and your kids, and let me look in your fridge and see what's going on." You'd be like, "What the hell is going on here?" But there are still ways that you can know your people. So the idea is there, but the execution obviously is very different. So I make the argument that there are a couple of ways that you should be knowing your people, and it's a framework called PACT, P-A-C-T. And these are the core elements that you should know about your people. So the P stands for personal values and motivations. So what do your employees care about and value, and why are they there? What are they aspiring for? What are they trying to do? This is very, very important, because one of the things that I wrote about recently is that culture should not be inclusive, it should be exclusive. In other words, and this was a big problem during and post-pandemic, when you try to be anything and everything to anyone, it becomes a disaster. Culture is not about trying to be something for everybody. Culture is about being a very specific thing to a very select group of people. So I don't want anybody to join my company. I want a very specific person to join my company who has these values, who has this work ethic, who has these beliefs. Like, that's who I want. I don't just want anybody to join my company. And this has been a big problem for organizations as they struggle to attract and retain talent. They try to be this place for anybody. Now, once you get alignment, yes, you want anybody to feel like they can show up and be their best professional self, not authentic self, best professional self. But the first filter is making sure that there's alignment between the company and the person, not that you're trying to be anything and everyone or anything and everything. The second part of that is aspirations and growth. So now that I know what your values are and your motivations are, what do you aspire to do? How do you want to grow? Who do you want to become? How do you see yourself in this organization? The C stands for circumstances. So employees don't exist in a vacuum. What's going on in your life that may impact your time here or your work here? Are you having a child? Are you going through a divorce? Is there a tragedy? Are you relocating? Like, what is happening in your personal life that I need to know about? And the T stands for talents and work preferences. So talents are, what are you uniquely good at? What are your gifts, your skills, your capabilities? And work preferences are, how do you prefer to work? Now, I'm not saying you need to cater to all of these things, but at least it's good to know. So some employees prefer to work in a hustle and bustle environment. Some employees prefer to do their work quietly, where they have more concentrated thinking. Again, it doesn't mean you need to cater to everything, but at least it's good to know these things about your employees so that when you make certain decisions, you can, accommodate as best you can. So that's kind of the PACT framework and what that looks like.
What's the best way to collect that data? Is it in one-on-one conversations with the manager? Is it HR sending out a survey with this types of information? I'm sure like circumstances and other things change over time too. So what's the data collection?
So both. I think too many organizations around the world rely very much on surveys. I'm not saying surveys are bad, but we do pulse surveys, we do engagement surveys, we do all these types of things. What's far more useful is to spend time with your people. Surveys are a dime a dozen. We get surveyed to death by any company we ever interact with. And I'm not saying there's not useful information that you can get from surveys. There certainly is. But there's a big difference between getting survey data versus spending time with the person and having a conversation with them. So both are important. Survey data is really good to get stuff at scale, to be able to break things down, things of that nature. But really for the deeper insights, the surveys are not going to collect that. You need the human touch.
In law number 3, grow or go, you paint a vivid picture of the next decade, which is kind of hard to imagine in some ways, but AI woven into every task, skills as the new currency, and learning becoming an expectation and not a perk. With that pace of change, how can organizations redesign learning so it's not a disconnected program, but more of a living system that helps people learn, unlearn, relearn fast enough to stay relevant in their jobs?
Yeah, this was an interesting one because more and more you see organizations who invest in things like LinkedIn Learning and Coursera and Udemy and Khan Academy. And I noticed that there was different types of organizations that emerge. So some companies, I would ask them, do you let your employees learn anything? So if you're in marketing, can I learn how to play the guitar? Can I learn how to cook? Can I learn about coding? Can I learn about things that are maybe not relevant to my role and function? And there were a lot of organizations who said, yeah, you learn about whatever you want. And then there were other companies who said, no, if you want to learn something, you are going to learn something that's relevant for your job. And we're going to focus on how you're applying that to your job. And you need to get approval and things of that nature. So I think the idea of just creating these learning programs for anyone to learn about anything is not good. I think learning should be specific. It should be tailored. It should be structured. And it should be tied to a very specific goal or outcome that you want to see. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, we treat learning inside of organizations as if we do learning for children. And obviously, if you have a child, go experiment, learn whatever you want. You want to try chess, you want to try guitar, like let's see, kind of what you gravitate to. Inside of an organization, you're not a child. You're being paid to do something. And if you're going to learn something, I want to know that the investment that I'm making in your learning and growth is going to result in some sort of a positive impact to the team, to the business, to the function as a whole. You want to learn how to play guitar in your own time? Fantastic. You want to learn how to play guitar while you're supposed to be working on a client project for marketing? I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. So the other interesting thing that I noticed is that a lot of these organizations, they don't track the impact of learning. You learn something, you get a certificate, and then the way that the organization tracks it is they say, well, how much time did you spend on the learning? What rank did you give it? What score did you give it? How satisfied were you? Who the hell cares? Who the hell cares? Like, for example, if I'm a swim coach and you're taking online swimming and training courses, and I look and you have spent 500 hours learning how to swim, and you got certifications and you gave all these programs 5 stars, but you've never jumped in the pool. What are we talking about here? So we shouldn't be obsessed with vanity metrics for learning. We need to be specifically tying back, how are the things that you're learning being applied? And this is where leaders come into play. Leaders should be putting their employees into situations where they are supposed to be practicing these skills. So if you're taking courses on conflict resolution, guess what I'm going to do as your leader? Next time there's a challenge between a client or between employees, or the debate comes up during a meeting, I'm going to say, hey, James, do you want to take a stab at this? What do you think? I'm going to throw you into that situation because that's what you've been preparing and trying to study and learn. So we need that on-the-job application for sure. AI, of course, can play a very powerful role here because it can see what you're learning, what you're studying, where the strengths are, what your weaknesses are, but it also has a very big blind spot. And I recently had a conversation with a vendor from TechWolf. A lot of people might know them. I talked to the CEO there, and we talked about this blind spot. So these AI tools, they really only work if they know what you're doing. So if I'm taking a course on LinkedIn Learning and the AI tool is hooked into LinkedIn Learning, it'll know what I'm studying and what I'm learning. But if I go to a conference, I read a book, I listen to a podcast, I have a conversation with somebody, I watch a YouTube video, I learn outside of my connected systems, these AI tools have no idea. And so they have a massive, massive blind spot. And this is why the manager and the leader plays such an important role. No one is going to have as good of a sense as to what your strengths or nobody should have as good of a sense as to what your strengths and weaknesses are and your abilities are as your leader and your manager. And it's funny, a lot of people don't realize this, but when we talk about creating a skill-based organizations, so the whole idea of a skill-based organization means that we're not going to focus on job descriptions. We're going to focus on skills that you as an individual have. And there are, again, a lot of challenges with this. The first challenge is that nobody's updating their skills on a regular basis. Like, I don't remember the last time I've updated my LinkedIn profile with skills. Probably 10 years. Right? I mean, I don't know if you updated it. I don't touch.
No. I was thinking about that the other day, actually. Have not done it.
So most people have these profiles in their companies where they don't really update or touch anything. So then the question becomes, well, how does the AI figure out what skills you have? So one of the things that these platforms do is, let's say you work at a company like Apple and you are a marketing manager. What these tools do is they will scrape publicly available data from other companies similar to Apple. So it might go to Meta, it might go to NVIDIA, it might go to OpenAI, other different companies. It'll look at the job descriptions for a marketing manager. It'll look at the skills that are required for that role. And because you have that role inside of Apple, it's going to assume that you too possess those skills that are in these job requirements. And it's going to throw them into your profile and say, these are the skills that you have. Now, it's a potentially good shortcut, but you need the human to validate that you actually have these skills. So there's so many companies out there who are getting rid of leaders. They're getting rid of managers. They're hollowing out the mid-level leadership role, which is a big mistake, because what's going to end up happening is you are going to create a company where you're so dependent and reliant on what the AI tells you, you're going to miss out on this entire human judgment. So I think we actually need more mid-level leaders who are going to be kind of the coaches, the mentors, the evaluators, the approvers. Right? These are the ones who actually create this matching of, yes, you do have those skills, no, you don't. And they do that by putting you in the scenarios, by having conversations, by debating with you, by challenging you, by pushing you. And so I think this is a very unique opportunity, and there's going to be a lot, I think, of transformation in that space.
The growth curve concept that you mentioned, how can companies use that to make staying at the organization as aspirational as realizing it's time to go.
Yeah. Oh man, you're really pushing me on some of these things. I got to remember all these concepts. So the growth framework is, and I'm trying to remember the visual that I have in the book. I don't know if I sent you the manuscript. Did you see that on there? Was there a visual? It's kind of like a little curve that goes up, right? And so the whole idea of this framework is trying to help employees understand, kind of where they are, if they should be there or not, if it's time to move. And so the framework is basically a series of questions that leaders should ask to determine where the employee is and if they should stay there. So the G stands for goals. And so the goals are, do they have personal and professional goals that align with the job description or that go beyond the job description? Are the goals reviewed on a regular basis? Are they aligned with the strategic priorities of the business? Obviously, if they're not, then that's something that you need to fix as a leader, right? So if an employee's not doing well, you start off with the G. Is there alignment on goals? Do I understand what your goals are and where you want to go? If not, you stop there and you fix that first, because maybe that's why the employee is struggling. Assuming that is aligned, you go into R, which is readiness. And readiness is basically, does the employee have the baseline skills? Do they have the behaviors? Do they have the mindset that's required to potentially go to the next step? So if I see, okay, we're aligned on goals, but I notice that this job requires a high level of maybe math or accounting or technical skills. And I notice that you're struggling in the technical skill area, and that's maybe why you're not ready to kind of go to the next step, or you're not performing at the level that you should be. Let's figure out how to get you the information that you need in these technical skills first. So R is readiness. O is opportunity. Are you giving the employee opportunities that they need? So have they been offered stretch assignments? Are they getting projects where they might get visibility amongst their leaders? Are they being mentored or coached in any way? Do they have access to the tools and training that they need? So again, opportunities is also a big factor there. The W stands for willingness. Are they motivated? Are they willing? Are they inclined to make the investments in their professional development? Are they willing to put in the time? Are they willing to do what is required? Because sometimes people are not. All right. There might be some times, and we see this a lot, especially in leadership roles, where they might have all the alignment on the other areas, but they just don't want to get into leadership. They don't think it's worth the extra time and effort and headache and money. And they're really good at what they do, but they just want to be an individual contributor. The T is time frame. So does the employee have enough time to show progress? I mean, if you've been in a role for 3 months and now you're coming to me and saying, well, time for you, I want a promotion. Have you been in that role long enough? Probably not. So you have to ask yourself, what's the average time that somebody's in a role before they move on to the next step? Has they had enough time? Has the employee had enough time with the right support? And then H is time for an honest decision. And the honest decision is, have both of you done the best that you can to decide if the person should either stay in their role, be promoted, or maybe it's time for them to leave the organization because they're not doing a good job. And so kind of the growth framework is just a really useful rubric, I think, for leaders to go through and for employees to go through to make sure that they're in the best possible position to succeed.
In law number 4, design for flexibility, you introduced this fascinating concept I've never heard of before. It's a real-time command center where employees can dynamically adjust things like workload, learning focus, visibility. It's almost like their personal Spotify settings. I think is how you describe it. Like, what would it take for an organization to actually build something like this technologically, culturally, and how might it change the traditional role of HR?
Yeah, I think the command center is a really cool idea. And I expect we'll probably see, I've heard stories of organizations that are playing around with it in the sense that like once every 6 months or once a year, an employee can log into their profile and just kind of put, do I want to travel? Do I not want to travel? And that's kind of like we're starting to see very early stages of that. But I imagine a time in the next coming years where you're going to be able to basically, have your command center where there's a lot that you can adjust. Projects that you want to work on, flexibility, travel, coaching and mentorship, leadership, growth trajectory. And so there might be times in your life or types of employees who might say, hey, you know what? I'm willing to travel anywhere. I want to be paid maximum salary. I'm interested in leadership. I'm willing to work and do whatever it takes. Like, throw me in there, go. And there might be other employees who say, well, I'm happy where I am. I want more stability. I kind of want more of the balance. I don't really care about the leadership role. I'm happy where I am. And so by being able to know and understand these things about your employees, you'll be able to give them the right opportunities that they need to be able to succeed. So the real-time command center is almost like, I'm trying to think if there's a movie. I mean, for some reason, the one that pops into mind is Minority Report, just because I always imagine these scenes where, Tom Cruise and Colin Farrell, they have these like command centers where they're able to adjust things and see things and swiping. And it's got that like cool visual in my mind. But yeah, command center, kind of like your personal Spotify. But within Spotify, there's like audio settings. So it's like the audio settings within Spotify: bass, treble. Are you listening to jazz? Are you listening to hip hop or house music? And it kind of adjusts all these elements depending on what you're listening to. And so, yeah, I mean, I imagine in the next, 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of organizations will have these types of things deployed, and it'll allow employees to really have more customization and flexibility over their career paths.
Law number 7, use technology to amplify humanity. You write that the real power of technology isn't in the automation part of it. It's in how it amplifies our humanity through insight, connection, and enablement. As organizations adopt new tools, how can leaders ensure technology is deepening these 3 areas rather than quietly eroding them?
So insight is, I think, a very interesting area where technology can help. Insight allows us to really get more of a breakdown, I think, into various things. So, for example, we don't really have tools that can do this yet, but I know a lot of the big vendors out there are in the process of doing this. But for example, wouldn't it be really cool to know which employees are likely to plateau or to get burned out in the next 90 days? Or which teams are thriving under their particular leaders, and why, what are some of the reasons why they're thriving and why they are not? And so you eventually will be able to get these really deep insights into what good leaders are doing, what good teams are doing, what successful employees are doing. You'll be able to get insights around strategy, around the direction that you should take for your business. Like, you'll be able to just get really interesting insights once you're able to connect all these different data points and make sure that the data is clean and standardized. Again, not there yet. I think this, again, will probably be 3, 4, 5 years for most organizations. But I mean, imagine if you had a system where even during a one-on-one interview, it'll pull information from an employee's job application, from interview notes, from a personality profile, from pulse surveys, from one-on-one meetings. You just pull all this information, and based on that, you'll be able to have a much better conversation with somebody, or you'll be able to understand what path they should take. Or even during the onboarding experience, how do I create a very unique onboarding experience for you that makes you feel like you're a good fit at this company? Again, I can scrape publicly available data. I can look at your preferences. I can take the notes from the discussions that we've been having, the interview process, and I can create very unique and tailored experiences to you. So I think the insight level is very, very unique as far as what we could potentially do there.
You end the book asking, what kind of future are you building and whom are you building it for? And if who's listening to this podcast, or maybe even picks up your book, if they ask that question today, what shift would you hope that they make in their organization and take action on?
Well, I think obviously the 8 laws are a very important critical framework for organizations to follow if they want to build a future-ready organization. But I have 5 potential futures at the end of the book. But generally speaking, I think people should just ask themselves what kind of a future they want to build. Right? I mean, a future that one company wants to build is not going to be the same as a future that another company wants to build. Amazon, for example, might say that they want to build a future where everything is automated in their supply chains and any manufacturing that they do and any logistics is fully 100% automated, and they want to reduce their headcount by 600,000 people. That might be the future that they want to build because they're interested in efficiency and productivity and getting products to customers as soon as possible. But there might be a consulting firm out there, or there might be a healthcare company that says, you know what? We want to actually focus more on the human side of what we do. We want to use AI to automate some of the boring processes like scheduling and paperwork, but we want to invest more in humans because we're in the business of taking care of people. So the only thing that I ask people to figure out is try to identify the future that you want to build instead of worrying so much about the future in terms of what it's going to look like and how you should be adapting to it. And I think that's the big mistake that a lot of organizations make. So I think that's the best piece of advice that I can give anybody. There's several questions and there's frameworks and there's different futures that I go over in the book. But most important piece is, what kind of future do you want to build and how are you going to build it?
Jacob, your book is The 8 Laws of Employee Experience, How to Build a Future-Ready Organization. It's out in February of 2026. Well done on the book, and I really appreciate you coming on. Anything that you want to share with people in parting, whether it's a thought or a call to action?
Yeah. So for people who are interested in the book, you can go to the number 8exlaws.com. That's 8exlaws.com. There's going to be some cool stuff that's going to be going out with it. We already have a CHRO community, which people can learn about at futureofworkleaders.com. There will be a non-CHRO component to this that I'm going to be launching soon, so people can stay on top of that too. And my email is jacob@thefutureorganization.com if anybody has any questions or want to send some feedback my way.
My guest today has been Jacob Morgan, the author of the new book, The 8 Laws of Employee Experience. Jacob, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.